You're listening to The Resilient Animal. I'm Annie Peterson, Doctor of Education with a Master's in Mental Health Recovery and Trauma-Informed Care. This podcast is an exploration of how helping other living beings can benefit mental health and what makes us all resilient animals. In this conversation, I speak with Eileen Persia, founder of the nonprofit The Troll House Animal Sanctuary located in New Jersey. Eileen shares her journey of starting the sanctuary amid the COVID-19 pandemic and her own cancer diagnosis. This is a story of resiliency through difficult times, the therapeutic role animals have played in her cancer recovery, and the establishment of Troll House as a refuge for abused and neglected animals. We focus on the transformative power of caring for others, both human and animal, and discuss the importance of mental health awareness and support in the face of adversity. Welcome, everybody. This is Annie from The Resilient Animal, and today we're chatting with Eileen Persia from the Troll House Sanctuary in New Jersey. So thank you so much for joining us today, Eileen. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Talk a little bit about the sanctuary, who lives there with you, and why you founded the sanctuary.
So in 2020, there was like COVID. The COVID started. I had to stop working at the time because I had my own business. I did house call dog grooming. So basically I took my equipment and I would set up in people's homes. Mostly these were people who, most of my clients were older or had disabilities, type, stuff like that, where it made it difficult for them to get in a car and take their dog for grooming. So when COVID came around, I had to stop working. It would be completely irresponsible for me to go from house to house when I'm dealing with elderly and sick people. So I was out of a job and I was working on my house at the time that ended up, so the property that I'm at right now, the house that is on the property ended up needing to be completely gutted. It needed more work than I thought it was going to need, like twice the amount of money that I thought, at least twice that I thought I was going to have to put into it. So this was all this horribly stressful time. And my dog Chewy, who is a Shih Tzu, who ironically enough, her owner had willed her to me. She passed away from breast cancer that had spread throughout her body. So I ended up with Chewy that way. So Chewy is a very clumsy Shih Tzu, and she decided she was going to try and jump off the bed and jumped off of my chest, causing a bruise on my left breast. And when I felt that bruise, there was a lump there. And I'm like, well, it's probably a hematoma. It's probably, something like that. So I kind of ignored it. Plus, trying to get into a doctor's office in the middle of COVID was nearly impossible. So instead of, it getting better, the bruise got worse, the lump was getting bigger, and so eventually I called my regular doctor, and I went in, and that was, I'm going to say, a good month and a half later, that, after finding this lump. She, too, thought it was a hematoma, but she was like, just in case, and I was, I think, 38 at the time, so it wouldn't be typical for a 38-year-old to get a mammogram. Most insurance don't cover. They don't cover a mammogram. So she sent me to get a mammogram just to check, just to make sure. And the results from the mammogram came back bad. And so then they were like, well, we want to do an ultrasound. So that was another 2 weeks of waiting for me to get an ultrasound. The results of the ultrasound, they were like, this is most likely something very bad. So then I had to go set up an appointment to get biopsies done, and they had seen issues in both of my breasts. So I had to get 3 different biopsies. That was another 2 weeks out. So at this point, this has been going on for months. We're now in the summer of 2020. I finally got the results back to all these biopsies, and it was just torture waiting for that. And I had just started working again because we were kind of getting the clear, and I had to follow all this like insane protocol where I was wearing like basically hazmat suits to go in people's homes to groom their dogs. And September 3rd, I got the call that I had everything in my right breast was okay, but I had HER2 positive breast cancer in my left breast. Hormone receptor negative, so it was literally just HER2 positive breast cancer. So that was like the end of the world for me. Like, I was like, what am I going to do now? It was crazy. So the upcoming like month, I had to get a port installed for chemo. I found out like what my protocol, like what my whole plan was going to be. And with HER2 positive breast cancer, it's extremely, extremely aggressive. I think at the time, my doctor, I think my breast surgeon had told me like 17 years prior, if you were diagnosed with HER2 positive breast cancer, it was a death sentence. Nothing would touch it and you would be dead in 2 years. Like chemo, nothing would touch it. And because it was, they don't really know what triggers HER2 positive breast cancer, and they don't really know, there's nothing that starts it. It's just like something that all of a sudden turns on, and because it's a cell, like you have HER2 cells like all over your body. So it basically can just travel. So even if you got a double mastectomy, it could be all over in your body. So basically the chemo wouldn't do it. But anyway, a doctor came up with Herceptin and Perjeta, and the results of the study that he did are amazing. Now, HER2 positive breast cancer most of the time is curable because of this discovery of those two drugs. But I found out that no matter what I chose to do, I still had to do chemotherapy first because of how aggressive the cancer is. So I had to do 6 rounds of chemotherapy that was every 21 days. In the meantime, I still took care of my horses, the dogs. Literally, they were the reason why I got out of bed. I had to. And chemo is like it's horrible. It is plain and simple. It's the worst thing. I probably would never ever wish it on my worst enemy. It's really bad, like really bad.
Yeah.
And anything that would like usually hurt, the treatment plan that I was going through is usually pretty straightforward, easy, not easy, on your body because it's a very aggressive treatment, but there usually aren't any issues until they met me. Anything that could go wrong went wrong.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was bad. My first round of chemo, I was like, a couple of days later, I was like, I feel fine. I don't feel like there's anything wrong. Like, I'm fine. And then all of a sudden, I was in the hospital. It was like, I don't even know, like my heart rate was elevated. And with the drugs that I was taking, like the Herceptin and the Perjeta, you had to go in and have ultrasounds done of your heart to make sure it wasn't affecting your heart, because that's one of the side effects. So they were really worried about that, and it just anything that could go wrong. I had an allergic reaction. They gave me fluids and stuff because I was severely dehydrated, so I'd have to go like a week later after getting my chemo and go in for fluids. They gave me something and I had a massive allergic reaction to it. Swelled up, I had hives, anything and everything that could go wrong. I had mouth sores, could go wrong, and I still was determined to take care of these animals. Like, I remember it was snowing and my hemoglobin levels were down to like I almost needed a blood transfusion, and I'd be outside in the snow, and I think it was really rainy that year as well, in the mud, and like my legs would just like give out, and I'm like, oh my, I'm gonna get killed. I'm out here like bald, I have no hair, going through chemotherapy, stuck in the mud somewhere. No one's gonna know I'm out here, and my horses are gonna run me over because it's dinner time. So it was an interesting time, and it was so surreal to me because I have dealt with depression and anxiety since I can remember, probably my early teens. And I had often, been very, very low, like very depressed, to the point where I, thought I'd be better off, everybody would be better off if I wasn't here. And then to all of a sudden be like, oh my God, I don't want to die. Like, this is terrible. and fighting for my life. So it was like this weird thing. And I was like, guess what? I have to do it. I've got 7 acres here. If I make it through this, I'm going to start the sanctuary. So during treatment and all, I started learning about potbelly pigs. Pigs have been like something that like I used to be scared to death of them, and then all of a sudden I was like, you know what, I really like them. I'd like to learn more about them. And we have a huge, I call it an epidemic, just overbreeding of potbelly pigs and all pigs in general in this area and all over, really, all over. So they were what I wanted to focus on, and because it was, of course, still doing during COVID, online like webinars where they would go on and they would give like care tips and health tips and basically would educate people, whoever joins, on pigs, how to take care of them. So yeah, that's basically what started it, was that whole thing. Have been involved in rescue my entire life. My mom was very involved with it, and it just kind of wore off on me. I didn't start the sanctuary officially, like with our 501c3 nonprofit status, until just about 2 years ago.
You post some really great content, and I really appreciate that. And I was actually checking out your Instagram today, and you posted something about Harley, if that's correct. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about Harley?
So Harley has been with me for 23 years. I rescued him from an auction in PA. Was it PA or New Jersey? I think it's New Holland, the New Holland auction, when he was a yearling and he was really very sick. He ran through the auction in a herd of other young minis that were all being purchased, and I ended up buying him. I paid $40 for him, plus transport fees. So he had strangles, he wasn't gelded, he was very underweight, malnourished, and completely unhandled. So it took me a while to get him rehabilitated and healthy again. So he has actually been living at my mom's house until I have like their area here ready, which is actually where my other horses are as well. They'll be moving here too, Penelope and Ozzy. So I actually got him moved over here, yesterday evening. We moved him over. He'll be 24 on April 6th, and I've had him for 23 of those years.
Some of the animals that you have rescued from auctions. And do you mind just sharing a little bit about what the life is like and why do animals go to auction? Excuse me.
So auctions are really a very hard farm animals, and that does include equines, are not protected by any laws whatsoever. So auctions are basically, if you've ever seen like a furniture or an antique auction where people sit and they have, the numbers, the little card that they buy, and they put the number up and they bid on, an item, except these items are actual living beings. And I think a lot of people are under the misconception that when their horses get old, or they outgrow them, or they're not performing the way that they want to, and people think that when they take them to an auction, they're going to end up in a good home. And 99, maybe 95% of the time, they do not end up in a good home. There are brokers that go there that buy for slaughterhouses, and this goes for all animals. I've been to auctions. There's guinea pigs, parrots, rabbits, anything other than, I've seen dogs there, but they weren't being auctioned off. They were actually being sold. So there's people that will go and buy for slaughterhouses. There's also people that will go and buy, say they were there and they saw, Harley. This was 23 years ago when I paid $40 for him, but someone would go and be like, oh, this herd is selling for $40 a head. I'm going to buy them all. take them to the next auction the following day or, the next week and resell them, hoping to make money off of them. So these horses and all animals that end up at the auction get shifted from auction to auction. Sometimes you might get lucky and they end up in a good home, but most of the time they do not. So, and then, there are really no ways of checking for diseases there. So they're picking up a disease in one place, they're taking it to the next place and spreading it. So most of the time these animals are going to be sick, which is why they have to be in quarantine for at least, if I go to an auction and bring home an animal, I quarantine them for at least 60 days.
Yeah.
Because there are some diseases that won't show up, for a while. Also behavioral issues, because some people will drug the horses so that they seem calm and then all of a sudden they're not calm. They're selling an unbroke, Arabian as, bomb-proof and safe for children, on the trails, and they've never had a saddle on their back. So it's a really, really bad place in general.
Wow, that's not something I thought about either, was them drugging the animals to make them more presentable, and be able to auction off. God.
Owning, or not own, I hate using the word own, but being a caretaker for horses, and I've had goats in the past, chickens and all, I knew that it's a lot of work. It's not something that you can just, it's not an office job. You don't just go in and you can turn it off and you go home and that's it. It's 24/7. You are in charge of these lives. It's not like I can very easily just go on vacation. So I knew that heading into this, but adding, multiple animals on top of still being in recovery for cancer, it's a lot of work. It's definitely harder than I thought. Plus trying to fundraise at this time of the year. Fundraising is terrible right now. I think it has been. I think I started a sanctuary at the worst time possible. I really honestly had no clue how tough fundraising was. And I had been on the opposite spectrum of that. I have been patrons of at least 5 different sanctuaries that I've loved. Still am a patron for them for many years. So I know what it's like to be on the donor side of it, and now I know what it's like to be on the the other end of it, the fundraising
right
side of it.
Eileen, I just have to say that I love you are so well spoken, and what you just said to me is the reason I wanted to start this podcast, because you are so resilient. And it's, when we were talking on the phone earlier, and you were talking about how, when you were sick, you still had to get out of bed and take care of the animals, and they really kept you going. I don't think you mentioned the story about Chewy before.
No.
So the animals those animals saved your life. Just before and after.
Yeah. And the weirdest thing is her mother had breast cancer. And I had been grooming her for years. And she had fought it and won and fought it and won, and it would travel, and it eventually ended up in her brain, and she knew it. She started making plans, and I was like, nah, don't be silly. She's like, would you take Chewy, because Chewy's not very nice. I used to actually dread going to groom her because she's just not very nice. She used to bite her husband. Her name was Marie, her previous mother, Chewy's old mom. She used to bite the husband. Chewy would only let Marie do anything with her. So she was like, you're the only one I trust with Chewy. I know, because she had another dog as well. She's like, I know he'll be fine, but my husband won't be able to touch Chewy. And I'm like, you're going to be fine. Stop. There's nothing wrong. She had beaten cancer so many times before. I'm like, yeah, you're going to be fine. And she wasn't. She called me from hospice and was like, can you come pick up Chewy? And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, the nurses are coming in to take care of me, and she's biting them. And yeah, she was not pleasant, but I was like, oh my God, okay, like it really, it happened. Like you're not doing good. I'm like, you sure you don't want to wait? Because like Chewy was like her, her pride and joy. And she was like, no, I can't wait. It's making everything stressful. I would feel better knowing she's in her home. So I was like, oh my God. So yeah. And then, like, not even, I guess I had her for about a year and a half, not even 2 years. And that's when she jumped on my chest trying to get off the bed. And if she hadn't, like, I don't know how long I would have went, you know, not realizing
Right.
that there was a lump there because it's just crazy. It gave me goosebumps. And I still talk to Marie's daughter, and she said the same thing. She was like, "This was meant to be, like that you had her."
I
Um,
know.
just
That's just
wild.
so crazy how the universe
Yeah,
just works like that. It's
yeah,
you can't, I mean, yes, the logical side of me says, "Oh, it's just all a really, fortuitous coincidence," you know.
right,
But there's
right.
too much. There's too
No,
much
no,
that happened for it just to be major coincidence after coincidence after coincidence. That's just
yeah,
crazy. Wow,
yep, yeah.
you're amazing. You're amazing, and the
Thank you.
animals are so fortunate that you're here, and we're glad you're here. We're glad you are here, and I mean, and I'm sure you've heard this before. It's terrible that it's cancer that made you want to
Yeah,
continue to be here, but I'm
yeah,
glad it did.
yeah. It was life changing. Like I wasn't even done chemotherapy, and a friend of mine contacted me, and she sent me a picture of Piggy Smalls, and he was in this small little area, like up to his chest in mud. And she was like, "Would you help him? I know this woman, and she's gonna take him to an auction." And I'm like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "I don't even have the sanctuary yet. Like, I'm not even done cancer treatment." So anyway, I got to talking to the people that had Piggy Smalls and found out a story, and it's just like every other story. They got Piggy Smalls when he was a tiny little baby. They actually got him neutered. That's a rare thing. Most people don't do that nowadays. And he was living as an indoor pig. And people, I think people, if they do know, like, they're going to get big, I don't think people realize how strong pigs are. Like, you have to, like, there is, like, kid proofing and puppy proofing your house, and then there is pig proofing. And that is, I learn something new every day because I have indoor pigs as well as the guys that are outside. It's insane what they can do. They can climb. I have like a bow window out front, and I found Tiger Lily, who is my one indoor pig, in the window when I came home. So she had climbed the couch and was sitting in the window, and I'm like, okay. And she ate an entire plant that I had just bought, like literally the day before it was gone, and she was proud of herself. Like it is, they're tough. Pigs are very, very tough. They're extremely smart and they get bored very easily. And that's what happened with Piggy Smalls. He started like moving their furniture around, and they can push a couch. They like with no problem, like just rubbing themselves on it like to scratch an itch. They'll move your whole table. Like they're a lot. So they kicked him outside, and then they felt bad because he was in this little pen. He didn't have any other friends, and I'm like, well, you know, I I'm going through chemo right now. Could you hold on to him for a little bit till at least I'm done this part of it? Because I like Piggy Smalls was small at the time, but he was still probably 60, 70 pounds at the time. And the size of like a bulldog. That's another thing is like when you say 60, 70 pounds, people think like German Shepherd size pig, and they're compact. Like they're real heavy. Like you ever picked up like a French bulldog? They're like the size of a 10-pound dog, but they weigh 30, and they're like strong. So I'm like, if he was to get out or if there was an emergency, I am too weak to pick him up and put him in my car if something was to happen. I said, can you just hang on to him until I'm a little bit stronger and I'm at least done chemo? So they held on to him for, I think, another month. And I went and I picked him up and brought him. I was living at my mom's house still with all of my dogs and now a pig and my horses at my mom's house. So I brought him there, and I learned really quick about pigs, like everything that I had learned by reading and doing all of those webinars and all that stuff, that it's nothing like having a pig in real life. Just, they are the most complex beings I've ever met. I would say, like, beyond human complex. Like, they are just wild. Every day I learn something new about them. They are like, if you would have told me when I was a teenager that this is what I'd be doing right now, I would have laughed at you, because I was so into dogs and horses then. Like, I was afraid of pigs at that time. Like, I couldn't even imagine. Like, now pigs are my favorite animals. Like, I love them so
They're
much.
so smart. They're so smart.
They are always 2 steps ahead of me. Like always. So trying to think of things to keep them entertained and happy every day it's a project for me. Like, they're amazing. I love them. But that's how we ended up with Piggy Smalls. So he was our first official, I guess, non-official sanctuary, because we weren't a sanctuary at that time, resident.
So before we go, though, because I know you've got your other job and other parents are coming to pick up their pups in a little bit, but can you also give us your contact information, how people can donate to you?
So the best way, hands down, is Patreon. It is a monthly subscription you can cancel anytime. There are different tiers that you can join. I have a $1 a month tier. There's $3, there's $5. You can sponsor an animal on there. I have quarter sponsorships, half, full sponsorships. You can sponsor a bale of hay a month. That's $10. But Patreon is the best, because what it does for me in particular, and I know for a lot of sanctuaries, is it is a guaranteed monthly income. So I can be like, okay, well, this is what I personally made this month, and this is what Patreon brought, donations are, so I can disperse appropriately, like, my money. And then, because I still am the biggest donor for the Troll House Animal Sanctuary, but Patreon definitely helps me budget better. It covers their feed, and then I can figure out, okay, so this much of my actual income has to go towards the sanctuary. So it's definitely a help. And my goal for Patreon is to have the sanctuary self-sufficient. Just the basics, covered 100%.
And people who aren't in animal welfare, or even those who are, but they work specifically with dogs or animals such as that, in California, where I am, is Southern California, we had a lot of rain this year, but we are mostly under drought conditions. And so hay is outrageously expensive, because it has to keep getting shipped in from further and further and further areas.
Yeah. Like, these draft horses blow through 2 bales of hay a day. Like, that's they eat a lot. Like, hay is very, very important. And I have a friend who lives in Studio City and boards her 2 horses in, like, the Burbank area, like near the LA Equestrian Center.
Yeah.
And she tells me what she spends on hay, and I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. And, like, the goats and the pigs now, like, if they're so picky. They are so picky about hay. They will only eat soft hay. And it has to be soft, and it has to be I swear they only want a certain color hay. Like, they're so picky. And I know they all can't be like that. I think it's just like how I don't know. I've made monsters out of all of these guys.
Oh,
and
that is so funny that you just said that, because so our guinea pigs are super picky about the quality of hay as well as the quality of vegetables. And we have this running joke where I have said to my husband, you have made a monster out of these guinea pigs.
because
Yep.
they're just, we make fun of them because, they're like, oh, we need to serve them on silver platters from
Yeah.
now
That's how I feel. I feel like I'm like the living. Oh, technically, I am the living maid here. Yeah. Like I have been trying because
on.
they were originally only eating. They refused to eat anything but those Stanley forage compressed bales that are like 50 pounds, and that was the only hay that the pigs and the goats would touch. That was it. And like we blow through that, and they were a lot,
Um,
probably just under $30. So
mm,
that was $30 a day that I was blowing through just in
mhm.
hay. And then when we just rescued Sprite, who is the pony, I'm like, we can't stay on the Stanley stuff, guys. We got to start looking elsewhere for hay that's comparable. So I would like travel all over trying different farms that are local, and right now like hay is not that good because we just came out of winter. And I'd bring the hay to them, and I'm like, "Is this good enough for you all? Is this okay? Do you like this? Is the texture okay?" And we actually found hay that they all like, and it's
Oh,
$10 a bale.
but
So
they're going to have a later on and say, there's better stuff out there.
yeah, they'll I'm sure they'll go on strike eventually. But yeah, these goats are picky. Like I, that's another thing. Like I never knew how picky goats were. Like if their hay touches the ground, like I have a little hay rack, if it falls on the ground, they won't touch it.
Forget
And
it.
even if I like scrape it up and put it back in, they know it's been on the ground. They won't touch it. They will not
Yeah,
touch the ground hay. Like
yeah,
if you give them
yeah.
treats like strawberries or blueberries, if it hits the ground, no, they don't want it. And I'm like, you guys were
Oh.
starving to death at one point, you know? And now you won't touch hay that fell on the ground? Like
I can't wait to play this back for my husband. He's gonna laugh so hard. He's gonna laugh.
it's my fault. It's my fault.
It's the same thing with us. It's our fault. It's nothing.
Yep.
It's nobody else's fault but ours.
Yep.
Well, Eileen, you were a joy to speak with, and I'm so happy you're around and doing all of these wonderful things for animals. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.